Welcome to the B2B Growth Blueprint Podcast, where we talk with entrepreneurs, founders, and leaders at B2B services, tech, and SaaS companies to learn the systems and processes they've used to create success for their business. And we'll also learn from marketing and sales experts to provide insights to help you grow your business. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and the podcast is brought to you by Modern Revenue Strategies and their 10x ROI B2B Growth Guarantee. Schedule a free diagnostic call to learn the fastest path to double your B2B revenues in just 90 days. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Osborne. Today, I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Dr. Thor Legvold. Now, Dr. Legvold is a global leadership advisor and founder of LC Global, where culture, leadership, technology, and psychology intersect to help organizations perform in complex international environments. He brings 25 plus years of experience advising executives and leadership teams across Fortune 500, mid-market, startups, and the public sector. He's lived and worked across multiple countries, speaks several languages, and specializes in aligning people and strategy when the stakes are high and the margin for error is thin. His work includes rescuing a failed global energy project in Asia, saving hundreds of millions of dollars by realigning fractured international teams, guiding U.S. companies into high-context markets like China, and leading post-acquisition cultural integrations that restored morale, productivity, and regulatory compliance. When global strategy breaks down, it's usually not the plan, it's the people. And Thor is the person organizations call when that problem gets expensive. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously done a lot of things spanning a lot of different locales. Why don't you give our audience a little bit of a story of what your twists and turns have looked like and how it brought you to where you are today?
Sure. You've covered a lot already, so it always sounds more impressive coming from someone else. But I started my career after grad school doing large-scale organizational transformation. So I was working for a public sector company that was going to downsize from 30,000 to 20,000 employees and privatize at the same time. It was the post office in another country. And that was a huge job. So I was part of a team of 12, 15 organizational psychologists across the country that worked together to support leadership and the employees in the organization as we walked through this very complicated process.
Yeah.
And then over time, kept working with large organizations, started working with smaller scale, started working with teams. I love working with teams of people and just seeing when you get everyone aligned and everyone's on the same page and we're pulling in the same direction, it is just incredible what we can accomplish. So started working out with teams and then into leadership development, working with individual executives. Moved here to America in 2018 and started focusing a little bit more on executive coaching, but I really love the systems, working with large organizations. So started doing that again, and a lot of cross-cultural things since I've always had a foot in multiple countries. And I kind of fell into a job funny story I can say for another time, fell into a job with an AI tech startup out of Europe that recognized they needed to establish themselves here if they were going to be successful. And grew that company from 3 or 4 people when I started to over 20 when I left at the end of last year.
Wow.
And we moved in the Gartner Magic Quadrant from a challenger to a leader in the space, which was really good to see the dedication and the work that we all put in all across the company to make that transformation.
Wow.
Yeah. So now I'm based in Los Angeles, and I'm back to doing what I love, which is consulting, helping people be more effective, work better together, have fun doing it, and doing something great together. That's why we're all here.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's interesting. So you mentioned, that you're in LA like myself, and we actually met at an Exit Planning Institute event. And so oftentimes when people are thinking about, a business preparing for exit, they're thinking about, how do we cut costs? Burn the furniture to keep from turning on the heat. Or how do we drive some top line revenue? One of the reasons people call me sometimes, or really that EBITDA and how we build those marketing and sales systems that grow. But one thing that you and I really resonated on in our conversation was this idea that culture and leadership can actually be a value multiplier when it comes to valuing a business and building that enterprise value. Talk to us a little bit about how you see that these sort of topics of culture and leadership as it pertains to M&A and in that valuation phase for a business.
Absolutely. Yeah. My assumption and my experience is that founders, they want their business to grow, right? They want to outperform their competitors. They love building things. They love seeing the results of their efforts. And once they start getting towards an exit or an acquisition, say they want to buy something else and grow, right? They want a great price. They want a great valuation, but they also want to take care of their people. They want to make sure that they're treated well. They want their legacy, if they've done something very unique, to continue and to grow under the new ownership. And as you pointed out, the most common ways to increase valuation is to either cut costs, reducing their spend, consolidating things, or increasing revenue, more sales, more marketing, changing the pricing up. There's a third option that I find often is, especially in the mid-market, because the bigger players obviously often recognize this, but it's through using the leadership and the culture as levers. And I found through 25 years of consulting across the world that the really successful companies, they focus less on the financials. They don't ignore them, of course, but they focus a lot more on the people and the culture. And that's where the value comes from, because all those numbers are driven by people, right? The people drive them. So when we look at Patagonia, Netflix, Trader Joe's, Salesforce, NVIDIA, SAIC, Costco, Apple, and so on, those are all companies that use these approaches by, yes, they're paying attention to financials. They have sophisticated people in place, but they're supporting their people. They're building a culture. People who work at Netflix are there because they believe in something, or Patagonia or Apple, not just to get a paycheck. Yeah. So, and I find, again, back to that alignment piece, when you pull alignment together and get everyone on the same page, working towards the same North Star, that is so powerful. And it creates an organization that is not only effective and shows good top and bottom lines, because that's where those results come from, but also it creates a workforce that has an inherent resilience. So when you do sell or acquire another company, you'll find that it's probably easier to integrate because the people are more used to that kind of situation, in the sense that they're empowered. I know what to do, right? And I understand my role. I understand why we're here. I understand what we're here to do together. And I understand that we're doing this together as a team, not just one person or another, and everyone else is just here to fill a role. Yeah. So, I did some research a few years ago. Deloitte actually did a survey. And they looked into kind of the effects of leadership. And they found that the second most important factor, and they asked around the world, second most cited factor in valuations, right? How much is a company worth? Most of the companies said their last financial report, 60%. 45%, number two, said the senior leadership team effectiveness. Wow. And 80% of those said that, we'll pay a premium if the company has a great leadership team that's really working well together. And another 80% said, you know what, we'd probably just pass if the leadership team was dysfunctional or even just ineffective. Because an effective leadership team de-risks the investment. Yeah.
So it's so interesting to hear you say that. And if you look at the Fortune 500 companies and their current valuations, as much as 80% or more of the value of a company comes from intangible capital, which is, very oftentimes things like the culture that you've created, the people that you have, the relationships that you've built with customers, the processes, but even those processes are largely informed by the culture that you've created and all those things. And so it's not surprising that it would be even kind of a close number two in terms of what drives the value, and certainly a deal breaker for a lot of companies that, if they saw that there wasn't that intangible capital there around the culture and the social norms, that it could really, derail an opportunity.
Yeah. And I love what you just said. And I want to emphasize that, because I think what you just said is really, really important, is that and this is especially relevant in the mid-market and lower market, there are very rarely written down institutional knowledge. All the institutional knowledge is with the people, the employees who are there. Yeah. If you go to Apple, everything is written down. Every process, every procedure, everything is documented. They even have, they worked with Steve Jobs before he passed to really set up an Apple school, how we think about things, how we approach leadership, all of that. Most companies in the mid-market don't have any of that. And if you are then dependent on these employees to be able to carry you through a transition, you better make sure that you retain them for the first, that they don't jump ship or find, when people get into situations where uncertainty is a big factor, we tend to kind of regress. We tend to seek certainty. And if you are one of the top performers in your company, you probably have a standing offer or two with a competitor who, calls you every 6 months or whatever. Hey, you don't want to come over and we'll give you a better, kind of overall compensation package or better, whatever, flexibility. Right. So that's also, you're going into a situation where there's a lot of uncertainty. So I saw actually one of your podcast guests mention that documenting processes is a great way to solidify a lot of those values and that institutional knowledge that otherwise could disappear or get lost. And I think that's a great idea. And what you pointed out is absolutely an important factor.
Yeah. So you've talked a lot about, and we were just sort of talking about culture and how that fits into processes and all of these things. And I know that you have a very sort of specific point of view on how culture works when it's really working well. And you were telling me about that sort of this idea of Nordic leadership and some of the principles that come from some of the Nordic countries are kind of like the Mediterranean diet for organizations. So, unpack that for us a little bit. Share that with our audience so they really get an understanding of what that means.
Yeah. So as I'm sure many of your audience has noticed, as have I, after living here a few years, I'm like, it's kind of weird that some of the best companies, the most successful companies in the world are based here and are leading on the leading edge of management, leadership, culture, all of these things we're talking about and doing great things for their customers, for society, for their shareholders. But there's a whole bunch of companies that aren't doing all of those things. And it was interesting to me because we keep seeing Scandinavian countries at the top of the global happiness report, the top of productivity charts, of high motivation, high employee engagement, very low turnover, high levels of innovation. I was thinking, we're capitalist societies. I hear sometimes people, oh, it's all socialism no, it's capitalist society, market driven, just like here. Yes, there are some cultural differences. I'll admit that. But by and large, I spend a lot of time researching and reflecting. We run things a little bit differently. We follow a set of principles that I've identified, 7 principles, and I call them the 7 principles of Nordic leadership because there are differences between the countries, but they're pretty common. And I find companies here that also use them, and they typically outperform their competitors, interestingly enough. And when I did this exercise, I spent some time, again, really kind of digging deep and reflecting. It occurred to me that I use these all the time. I've used them throughout my career when I'm working with leaders with organizational change. So yeah, it's like they're not unique principles that only apply in the Scandinavian countries. By no means. These are well-documented, well-researched, foundational practices that we know have great results. We have almost 100 years of management research in journals, in practice, not just in the US, but also around the world. Mm-hmm. And there's an interesting number that came out from Gartner a while ago. 82% of leaders around the world have no formal leadership training.
Wow.
And to me, leadership is a skill like any other skill. If you're going to be good at marketing, you study marketing and you practice. Right. If you're going to be a good sales, if you're going to be a police officer, you learn how to drive a car, you learn how to operate a weapon, you learn how to de-escalate a situation. So leadership is a skill, but we don't seem to think of it like that often. So we put someone who is a top performer in whatever role they're in as a leader and say, well, now you're a leader. Well, now we're asking them to use skills they don't necessarily have. The top, you're our top salesman 3 years in a row.
Right.
Now you can be the head of sales. But that entails you are going to be doing something very different than what has given you all the success.
That's right.
So I think really empowering leaders, and that's part of this, is empowering your people, setting up the company for success. And again, I'm big on alignment. So I like to work with the leadership team, get them aligned, because even if you have strong individuals, if they're not all pulling together, they are by definition pulling apart. So once they're pulling together, then we take a second step and we say, well, let's look at the culture and the structure of the organization. Is it actually serving the business needs and the strategy of the company? So as a very obvious example, say you have a company that's based on innovation, a young company, maybe 50, 60 employees, and the founder had some really good ideas and a good network, patented a few ideas, sold a few ideas, and now has all these people working who are supporting, but he has to make the ideas. He doesn't want anyone else, and maybe there's 4 or 5 levels in the organization. The more levels you have, the harder it is to innovate, and the harder it is to find that great connection between the parties. If you look at NVIDIA as a kind of opposite, Justin Juan, he has, I think, 36, last count, 36 direct reports, and most of their meetings are on the floor with the entire company or most of the company present and say, hey, this is our next 6 weeks. Wow. This is what the market looks like. Everything is shared, everything's transparent, and the decision-making is participatory. Everyone is included. How is this going to affect you guys over there at the fab? How is this going to affect marketing? What's going to happen with our collaboration with OpenAI if we do this? So that everyone kind of gets to have a voice. It doesn't mean everyone gets to say, everyone doesn't get to decide, but everyone gets an input and is able to be heard. And that's also one of these principles of Nordic leadership is allowing people to be heard. Again, not that everyone's going to get their way, but it really helps enhance buy-in. And it also helps people understand, why are we here and what are we doing? And why is it important that we're doing it this way? Oh, right, we had that town hall, and it's because if we do it this other way, we're exposing the company to undue risk, for example, or whatever it might be.
So you've been weaving some of these in, I can tell from what you're describing. Yeah. But are there some specific principles that you want to call out and sort of name, or maybe there are some kind of 2 to 3 practices that a founder or entrepreneur that's listening, like what could they do to start to incorporate some of this into their business and build the culture with their teams?
Yeah. The primary 3 that everything else is built on are really simple. First is equality or fairness. Okay. So we're all in this together. We're all in the same boat. If there's a hole in the boat, it affects all of us. So we all need to be working together. And it also means that people feel like they're being treated fairly. Yeah. Right. If you join a company and they say, well, we're at the very bottom of the market as far as pay goes, but it'll be a great experience for you. So maybe, but what is it should be good for everyone. There should be an element of fairness in things. Yeah. Second is companies that are values-based and purpose-driven. We're here for a reason. Patagonia is an amazing example of that. Yeah. And there's a lot of research to support this. They outperform all of their competitors easily. So because if you say, hey, everyone's got to work overtime another weekend, if there's a clear purpose, we're doing something so important. We're going to put a man on the moon, or we're going to launch this new product that's going to change everyone's lives. That's one thing. But if it's so that, well, there's no real clarity in it. I think the boss mentioned something about buying a boat. I don't know. It creates a very different environment. Yeah. And these sound like very banal examples, but you would be shocked at some of the examples I've heard and seen. And the third one that I would point out is delegation and empowerment, and that participatory decision-making is part of it. But that's one of the things that we do a lot in the Nordic countries is we delegate and we empower our employees. We want them to come up and to grow and to add responsibility and get more responsibility and more pay, but they're doing more and more of the work. One question I love asking, especially founders, but also business owners. I was at an event in Beverly Hills a few weeks ago and talking about a few of these leadership issues. And I said, how many of you can go on a vacation, say 2-3 weeks, right, with your family and trust that everything is just going to go smoothly? Because if you're not, if you are not putting yourself in a position where you are the strategist who is looking big picture and making, the big connections and everything, and then empowering your team to execute on that. If you're in the weeds doing all this day to day because you can't go anywhere without everything falling apart, you have a problem. You have a real leadership problem. And I'm sure you've seen this as well.
Well, and that brings it back full circle to the idea of, evaluation and this, the value of the enterprise and the potential for merger acquisition or recapitalization. If there's, so much owner dependence that they can't go on vacation, that's really scares off, all of the best buyers. Partly not necessarily because it scares them off, but just they have better options available to them. And so it really limits that buyer pool. And, there's a lot of evidence that, multiple offers really drives the value of an enterprise. And so if you're just sort of limited to only the people who, kind of can't do anything better, then you're not going to get the maximum value for that organization.
Absolutely. And what you're outlining also is it goes, I think, also to historical kind of, I think we're in a paradigm change, because the whole command and control way of managing, when I read online, especially a few years ago, there was a lot of stuff about wearing little monitors and seeing how often you're on the screen and how often you get up and have a break. And I was like, if you don't trust your employees, you have a bigger problem than,
That's right.
And, Netflix, their main message to new employees: do what you think is best for the company.
Yeah.
You're an adult, and adults are treated like adults. Costco, Costco has a really strong sense of ethics. Obey the law, take care of your members, or our members, Costco's members, take care of the employees, respect our suppliers, right? Fairness and equality, take care of your shareholders. Richard Branson has a really good explanation of the same kind of principle. Says if you treat your employees as well as you can, pay them as well as you can, help them, educate and improve and grow in their roles, take on more responsibility, they will take care of your customers, because they're the ones who are meeting the customers. And guess what the customers take care of?
You.
Shareholders. Yeah, you. And it's a circle. It's more like farming or gardening, right? You can't just go straight to the money. You have to actually do a few other things, and it's a chain, and you have to feed that chain, and you have to understand where you can influence it to get the max results. And that's where I come working with the leadership and the culture.
I love that. Well, and also that kind of delegate motion really depends on having those processes that again are what limit that, sort of owner dependence when you have those processes. Yeah. But one of the things I love about it is, and I don't know where this phrase came from. I'm certain I'm stealing it from somewhere, but the idea of to delegate and then elevate, because in fact, when you set a process that creates sort of a baseline level of quality, and then you delegate that to other folks, you enable them to bring new creative ideas on how to improve this, how to improve the outcomes. Exactly. That if you as the business owner or entrepreneur are tightly holding on to everything and not allowing other folks to bring in, well, then you're limited to the best idea you can come up with. Whereas when you enable other folks, you can bring so much more brain power into it.
Exactly, which is why I tell people delegate responsibility, not tasks. If I tell you, Mark, I want you to go out front and I want you to sweep and I want you to hold the broom like this and do exactly like that. Nobody likes to be told exactly. And obviously there are some situations in a restaurant, certain policies and procedures need to be followed. Absolutely. But the more you give people an opportunity to inject their own personality, their own creativity, their own ownership, you get so much more motivation, engagement, productivity, and innovation, as you pointed out, which is super important. It's like, hey, what if we did it this way? Right. Let's try that. That's amazing. And we all go back always to the same statistic. Everyone, 70 to 90% of deals, fail. They don't fail. It's just that you end up with two companies that never get along, and you don't realize the value that was inherent in all those forecasts and all that valuation and all that work ahead of time. And the two top factors, guess what those are? Leadership and culture. Leadership and culture always goes back to the same things. There's an interesting Bain report from last year. And their summary was basically, it's really incredible how sophisticated M&A has become with the forecasts, with the valuation, with the quality of earnings, EBITDA, all of these different things just really gotten very fine-tuned. And then they say, except for the leadership and culture. There's still so much to be done, and we're still so far behind on that side of the deal. And that's the side of the deal If the people aren't on board, you have issues.
Yeah.
There's a quote or a slide, or I don't know, that I use often when I'm working with organizations and leadership, and it's Q times A equals E. I think it's from Six Sigma originally, but I'm not Sigma certified. But it's basically the quality of the solution. So this is for change management. So that however the quality of the solution, we have bought the very best CRM in the entire world. It's better than anything. Right. Times the acceptance, A.
Yeah.
If the people who are going to be using it aren't on board with it, aren't interested, don't see the benefit, don't understand why it's going to help them, and is equal to the effect or the success of the change. And if you don't have that A down, 90% of the initiatives that fail, transformational or change initiatives that fail, come down to there was not enough buy-in from the people. They didn't work. No, but this is what we're going to do. The boss has made it as, oh, well, that's great. Boss can do whatever he wants. There's another job. The labor pool is shrinking. I don't know if people recognize that, but the labor pool, especially for skilled, qualified labor, is shrinking. So it's going to be harder and harder as we move forwards through time to find really good, qualified employees. So take care of the ones you have is one of my pieces of advice.
Well, Thor, you're obviously an expert in a lot of really interesting topics, and we could talk about it all day, but I got to be mindful of your time. But before I let you go, like, who exactly do you work with? What do you help them with?
I get a number of questions around the same area often. And, what industries do I work in? Any industry that has people.
Okay.
So obviously there has to be enough employees that it makes sense. If there's 5 people, I have worked with startups as well, but typically I go in where there's 40, 50, 60 employees and up. And I've worked with global 100s and really big companies and really small ones. Yeah. I love working with family firms and founder firms. And when it comes to the timing, that's another thing. People, so when should I bring you in? I said, well, invariably I'm called in too late.
Sure.
Almost always. What do we do? So there are a few things that I suggest. One is anytime you're looking to either sell or buy or evaluate, do a management audit and a cultural due diligence. Doesn't take a lot of time. It's not super expensive or anything. And it gives you so much information and insight into how the management is functioning, what the culture is. And I focus a lot on cross-border deals, but even domestically, it's as important. It's just we think, oh, we're all speaking the same language. It can't be that big of a difference or a deal. Right. But if one company is doing things one way and another is doing them completely opposite, you're going to have a huge crash when those two companies are trying to be brought together. Yeah. So what I suggest across the board, I do a team assessment. It takes 20 minutes. The leader goes electronically to the leadership team. Each of them fill it out on their own. I get the results, can go through, and it gives amazing insight into where their strengths are, where their gaps are, how they're functioning as a team, if they're really on fire or if they're kind of uncertain and not really doing anything, or if they're having a great time together and love to be on the golf course, but they don't really get much done. Uh-huh. Or if they're driven, like just being whipped, but are they out of fear or out of I just want my bonus and I don't really care about what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Really important factors to understand, both in the valuation, but also when you start planning out the integration. Because in my opinion, and experience, the integration needs to be planned out at the due diligence stage. That's when you should be collecting all the information, saying, okay, these are the different IT systems, these are the different CRMs, these are the HR bonus pack and compensation packages. Oh, these are our key processes. These are our different cultures. This is how our leadership operates and functions. Let's look at that too.
Yeah.
So those are things I really recommend. Is just and a management audit is nice because it looks at the team. We're not calling out individuals. We're just saying, how does a team functioning as a team? Because that's where the real value is often missed.
Yeah, and where that synergy really lies.
Yes.
So for those that are listening and want to get a slice of this for themselves, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Best way is go to the website, send me an email or a call. It's legvoldconsulting.com. You probably want to spell it out for people because it's a long and complicated last name. It's Norwegian.
Legvold, and we'll have that in the show notes for folks as well.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, Thor, thank you again for joining us. I really enjoyed our conversation. I know our audience got a lot out of it too.
Thank you. This has been awesome. I so appreciate it. You such great questions and insights you've come with as well. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining this episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint Podcast. We hope you've gained insights to grow your business. If you enjoyed this discussion, please rate, comment, like on your favorite platform, and share to others who will find it useful. Do you know a CEO, founder, or leader at an early stage B2B services, tech, or SaaS company who would like to be a guest and share their story? Send us a note. Let's schedule a conversation.